Hello and welcome to another SDAQ&A. I'm your host today, Peter Dixon. My very special guest is Dr. Steve Daly. How are you, Steve?
Great.
Great to have you back.
Good to be back.
I think this is our fourth interview, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if that counts the Norris one or not, but
That'll be including the Tom Norris one as well. And I'm also trying to set up another interview with you and someone else that has put their hand up. I won't say who, but put their hand up, and if that eventuates, we'll get you back again.
looking
And
forward.
they've both been the interviews we've done together so far have been very popular. And thank you also for the plug you gave me on this. I'll share the screen because I'll give the guy the guy that interviewed you a plug.
Yes.
And you mentioned SDAQ&A there. It's called The Influence Continuum with Dr. Steve. Is it Hassan?
Yeah, Stephen Hassan.
Hassan, okay. And it was a really good. Is it a two-parter? I listened to about 48 minutes. What seemed to be one.
Yeah, they said it was a two-parter. But it seemed like that first interview was most of what we did in the studio. So I don't know if he's gonna take my. I filled out his whole bite model, and maybe he's gonna take what I gave him with the bite model and do a second part or something.
Okay. It's a really good interview, and I encourage people to go and see that, listen to that.
Yeah, it's Freedom of Mind is the name of his website.
What was it called?
Freedom of Mind.
Right. And while we're doing the little sharing thing, I would like to share your book on the screen as well. This is available on Amazon, but people can also buy it directly from you as well. Can you share us some links and ways people can get?
Yeah, I
this
kind of
book?
got tired of having to mail it out myself, so I prefer they get it through Amazon. My EGW Psychobio website, it is available, and when the new book comes out, I may try to encourage people to use that more. But I got tired of having to mail out books myself, so I encourage them to just use Barnes and Noble or Amazon or the major distributors.
Yes, oh, that's good. It means you get a little less money, but a lot less stress.
You're right. I've been traveling a lot, so it's really hard to be trying to mail out books all the time.
Yes, I can imagine. Well, sorry, just find where my buttons are. There we go. We're back. And just a quick plug before we start, those that are watching and love supporting the channel, you can click the QR code up the top here and make a donation to my PayPal. You can click it again here. Sometimes I bring it up on the side there. That just supports what I'm doing here at SDAQ&A. You can go to Spotify and listen to my album Standing at the Cross there. You don't need to click the QR code. You can just go to Spotify and type in Peter Dixon Standing at the Cross. Or if you'd like to support by buying one of the songs, you can go to that QR code there. And for $1, get to support. But one of the main things you can do to support the channel is just simply click like on Facebook, like and subscribe on YouTube. And exciting, we're nearly at 1,000 subscribers. We've got the countdown. It's around 100 and something to go, so we're very much looking forward to that, because Facebook rewards you when you hit 1,000 subscribers. It's like a metric that then pushes your channel out to a bigger, wider audience. So we're looking forward to that. So yeah, as I said, great to have you here today. One of the main reasons we've got you on the show today, and I've called the show All Things Canright. We're going to be talking about a new book that you are writing with Nancy Page, who has also been on the show before, and her connection with author Carrie Johnson, who wrote a book called I Was Canright's Secretary.
Yes.
It's a fascinating read, but it's kind of an attempt to dismiss D.M. Canright and his critique of Ellen G. White and the Adventist Church. So we're going to talk about that because it turns out that Nancy is Carrie Johnson's granddaughter. And so let's start by you telling us how you met Nancy, how this new project started, and then I want to talk a little bit about who Canright is, and then we'll get on to Doughty's book and the Canright Secretary, and how your book talks about all those different books.
Great. Yes, I met Nancy on my Facebook thread, and I do a post every day, and she was a faithful follower of that. And through her comments and stuff, I came to discover, who she was and her relation to Carrie Johnson. And the more I talked with her, we talk on Messenger and email, and the more I realized, her and her brother had a very strong untold story about Arthur White and his involvement in the writing of I Was Canright's Secretary, secretly meeting with Carrie Johnson for more than 20 years. And he did it secretly. He denied doing it. He helped her steal Canright's diary and housed it in the White estate at Andrews, where it still is today. So there was a lot of stuff there that really caused me to research a lot of these things again, and research them at a level I'd never even thought about doing before. And the more I did that, the more I realized, hey, this is a book that needs to be written. And I asked Nancy if she wanted to help me with it. And she said she didn't have a lot of time for writing, but she did do a nice, almost 20-page interview with me that's included in the book. And she did write part of the preface and stuff with me. But I refer to her a lot in the book because the book couldn't have been written without her and without Norman Doughty. Those two people are both essential to the information that exposes I Was Canright's Secretary as a total fabrication. I don't apologize for saying it's a total fabrication, because the book demonstrates clearly that Carrie Johnson not only was not Canright's secretary, but she never even met the man. She never even saw the man. This was just a complete fabrication. And Arthur White knew about it, and he participated in it. And, the level of fraud and cover up, and it's just so ridiculous, the level of dishonesty and character assassination. Some of the very worst things that Carrie said about Canright were not included in the book, only because Arthur White came to realize that she was a pathological liar. And but she went out on the camp meeting circuits, saying he was completely demon possessed, and when he dictated to her, he was demon possessed and spoke in a demonic voice. And I mean, just the most outrageous stuff. She said he was completely an indigent, homeless, 100% dependent on Adventist to eat. I mean, the stuff she said was just so absolutely untrue and ridiculous. And these interviews are still played by Adventists over the air. It's just incredible what they've done to that person's name and his family name. I had a member of one of the other families that, well, I'll go into that later, but you wanted me to basically just say my relationship with Nancy.
Yeah.
And we've come to be great friends, and we're really excited about this project together.
Yeah, I can't wait for it to come out. In fact, this is like a pre-release discussion, and then when it does come out, we're going to get you back with Nancy and have a deep chat about the actual book. Just going to quickly bring up a couple of comments. George T. She has said, "Are you broadcasting on Facebook?" Yes, we certainly are. We've got Chris Lucas, regular watcher, is just saying hi to everybody. And Moto Sapiens just written, he's down on time for a change. Welcome. Good to have you here. Bunch of great comments. We've got Test the Prophet. I'm not sure if you've watched Test the Prophet's YouTube channel, an incredible channel.
Yes, it's great.
We've got CMB, the ambassador, watching. And one last quick thing. Sola Scriptura has written, how much of the show I missed? Hardly anything. We're just starting. So I want to come back to the new book, and I want to come back to chatting about I Was Canright's secretary, and also Doughty's book, The Case of D.M. Canright. But I want you to unpack for me who Canright was, to let everyone know who might not be aware of who he was, how he sits into this conversation.
Yes, the more I've researched Canright, which I didn't do all that much in my psychobiography, I did some, but not nearly at the level I did for this book. And my respect for Canright and his integrity has just gone through the roof. I think he was a remarkable, courageous man, and a deep, dedicated Christian, a man who stood up against a whole denomination of deceit and evil and lying. And the irony for Adventism is that they could have avoided the whole Canright situation if they had just honored the truce that Canright made with them, when he left. And he's the one that said, I want to leave on peaceful terms. I don't want to have any conflict, negativity. It was the Adventists then who insisted on attacking him in the Review and Herald repeatedly and calling him a Judas and an apostate and just making up all kinds of lies about him that were completely ridiculous, and to the point where he felt that he had to, defend his reputation. But Adventism brought all that on themselves. And it's not really surprising to me that Arthur White was willing to take such ridiculous risks with his reputation and status, because Canright was a huge, even in the 1950s, Adventists had attacked other churches so much. They were so known for condemning all Catholics, all Protestants. They've sent out 1 billion copies of the, Great Controversy to do it again now. I'm getting communications from people who are getting this book mailed to them, and they're saying, what in the world is this? The GC presidents insisted on sending out 1 billion copies of this.
Has he done that now? I've heard it was about.
He's in the process of doing that right now. So people are getting them in the mail and stuff. But, the other churches saw Adventism completely as a cult. And that's why in the 1950s, the Figueroa administration tried to deceive Walter Martin and make him think Adventists were something they weren't. But, Canright was becoming more and more and more effective through the whole 20th century there. And Arthur White knew it. And he knew that, something had to be done to stop his influence. And so they made up this complete fabricated book, that presents him in a way that's just 100% not true. He was as Canright makes it very clear in his books, the easy thing for him would have been to stay in the church. He had high positions. He had it made. He had a salary. He had friends. The easy thing for him would have been to go along to get along. And it was a very hard decision for him, to cut all ties and to know who Ellen White was and what she was going to do to him. And, that's precisely what happened. She condemned him to hell. And she, when you have a prophetic personage like that condemning you to hell in front of your entire world, and you're the lone standing person against all that, it takes remarkable courage. But Canright was just plain a man of integrity. I don't think I would have left and said, I want to have a truce and I won't say anything negative, and I expect you to do the same. And, I think I would have said, after the way I've been treated, I'm going to be honest about who you guys are.
Mm.
Canright, went out of the way to protect Ellen White, to protect the church. It was the Adventist church that just insisted on being morons. And they, I think they thought they had gotten away with it once Carrie's book was published and the whole church turned on Canright. And, you bring up Canright's name in Adventist education and everyone dogpiles. He's Benedict Arnold. He's the worst person who ever lived. He's this terrible, man who stabbed Ellen in the back and all this kind of stuff. It's completely the opposite. I mean, he was loyal to her. He treated her nicely when she condemned him to hell. He went to her funeral when she condemned him to hell. He was just plain a good Christian minister, and he always had great respect outside of Adventism. Everywhere he went, everywhere he served, in spite of the Adventist lies that say the Baptists rejected him and stuff, that never happened. A main street of his town was named after him. Adventists always have this huge investment in trying to say he died in obscurity because that was Ellen White's prophecy about him.
Mm.
But it was the exact opposite.
Recanted at her funeral.
Yeah, I mean, it's the exact opposite. They claim no one attended his funeral in Carrie's book and stuff.
Mm.
It's just a complete lie. The church was completely packed. It was packed with ministers from different denominations. Canright was a man who was dearly loved and respected everywhere he went. And Adventists have had a very successful trip trying to discredit and destroy him. And I'm glad you're doing the Canright appreciation group and stuff, because this man really needs to be appreciated for who he was. He was a whistleblower of the highest order, the highest integrity, a man of God, a man who was extremely gracious, extremely loving, extremely caring, extremely well studied. It's just hard to find fault with the guy, really. And yet you listen to someone like Tom Norris and he acts like Canright was the devil incarnated or something. People that are just ignorant about Canright. And that's why we owe so much to Norman Doughty, because he's the one that wrote the book, The Case for D.M. Canright, that, is so well researched, so well studied, so well documented. He has all the testimonies in there about how Canright was dearly loved and dearly appreciated by so many. And the Adventists claim that he left the church for fame and fortune was the exact opposite of the truth. Like Canright said, he was giving up everything. He had no clue what was next for him when he left Adventism. He did get a bunch of offers, but he ended up helping a small, poor Baptist church that couldn't even pay him a full salary when he had 10 different offers from larger churches that would pay him a full salary. So he was hardly the kind of person that Adventists try to depict him as being. And that's just typical of the Adventist dishonesty when it comes to anyone who's critical of their sanctified cow.
There's something that you've said occasionally, and it's something I've noticed within the Adventist Church as their default response to criticism is they attack the person. Uh,
Absolutely.
and I've known with you, you've had a lot of attacks, but I haven't seen anywhere where they've refuted your claims. Uh,
Absolutely.
and the same can be said for Canright. Instead of addressing the claims, it's just attack the person. The ad hominem
Right.
attacks are a default Adventist um, kind of pattern. Have you noticed that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's because they don't have any ability to attack the documentation. That's why I so heavily documented my psychobiography, because I knew it was going to come under major fire. And not a single Adventist historian has been willing to step forward and try to say that that documentation is unsound.
Yeah,
It's it's just overwhelming in terms of what it says about Ellen White and the fraud and the dishonesty and the lifetime patterns of these things, blasphemy. It's very, very sad. The plagiarism, all these things dogpile on top of each other. And Adventists know it. The historians should know it if they're at all competent. But, they have to save their jobs and all this kind of stuff. So, or else their status within Adventism and this kind of thing. But,
I
you
remember.
know,
I
the
remember.
big thing with me is they try to say it's bitterness or revenge or all this kind of stuff when it's 100% not true. My
Mhm.
experience in Adventism was a good one. I enjoyed those 35 years. I did my best to try to move the church in a healthy direction. And then I had 14 more healthy, positive years after leaving Adventism, but no bitterness at all. It's just that, I hate to see people perpetuating a lie the way they have and not having any accountability for it.
I'd encourage people to go and read the two Canright books. I might try and bring them up on a screen later. The Life of Ellen G. White and
Yes,
also Seventh Day Adventism Renounced. Um,
absolutely.
both still available.
Great
And
books.
what are your thoughts on um, some of the issues raised in both of those books? We'll just touch on that a little bit. Um, but can you share some of the claims he made against Ellen White and the Adventist Church?
Yeah, as I read through both of those books, I generally agree with both of them. There's not a lot in there that I would take issue with in terms of what he said. Theologically, I have but even in Canright's day, I think he had a pretty healthy view of the gospel. Uh, he came to understand and appreciate the true gospel in a way that I think was pretty outstanding. But obviously we've evolved beyond Canright in a lot of ways. So there are many things that Canright probably wasn't aware of that we are now, but the extent of her plagiarism and all these kinds of things, he didn't have the benefit of the research of Ray and the research of numbers and all these kinds of people. And now we have digital research. And so with every passing day, Ellen White gets more condemned for what she did. And it's just like McAdams' most recent book. This is what's so ironic about sending out a billion copies of The Great Controversy, that Donald McAdams just wrote his book, Ellen White and the Historians. And he studied Great Controversy his whole life and documented that every single paragraph in Great Controversy is plagiarized, either by a non-Adventist or an Adventist author. The entire book is just nothing but plagiarism.
What's his book called?
Ellen White and the Historians,
Oh, right,
and it's just came out in 21,
right.
um, 21 or 22. It's a very new book, but Anyway, that's a joke that they sent out all these copies of The Great Controversy when the book's exposed as just a complete plagiarism from Adventist and non-Adventist authors. And of course, we pretty much knew that anyway. But McAdams has studied it way more than any other person,
Wow.
and I just find it comical that his research and stuff would be published right before they send out 1 billion copies of this book all over the world.
It's interesting. I just quickly Google it to share, and when that book comes up, it's interesting that your book is directly underneath it there.
Yes.
Got Ellen White and the Historians, A Neglected Problem and a Forgotten Answer. And then we've got yours, Ellen G. White, A Psychobiography. So, right, I want to talk a little bit about. I'll just bring this up on the screen as well. Here are the two Dudley M. Canright's books, The Life of Ellen G. White and Seventh-day Adventism Renounced, just if people want to go and check that. And thanks for the little plug there about my DM Canright
Sure.
appreciation Facebook group. It's kind of a little bit of a side project, a little bit of a hobby there. I find, like, I agree with what you said. There's things that can be revised now in light of new research, etc. But his actual writing style is very modern, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
up pretty well to modern times.
Yeah, one of the things he points out is that James White was a lot like his wife. He would just steal the thoughts of the young ministers, including himself, and claim them as his own. And that James wasn't a student himself. And Canright was a real student. There's a huge difference between Canright and James White.
And he left the church about a year before James died. Is that right? Or he left
Well, he officially left in 87, and James died in 81.
I'm thinking of just before 1888, the great conference there. Yeah, that's right. So, and he was a member of high esteem quite early on in the denomination's growth too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he had 3 leaves of absence, and Adventists claim he left, 3 times before. But all the bigwigs in Adventism had leaves of absence. They all had questions. They all had times they needed to get away. And none of the other leaves of absence are called leaving the church. And in every case, he was given a high position as soon as he came back from the leave of absence, which wouldn't have been the case if he'd left the church, obviously. So,
Very true. Now, I'll just bring up a couple of comments. I like to do that every now and again. We get so many, otherwise I get lost trying to find them again. Thank you, Peter and Steve, for expounding documented truth. It's refreshing to hear sound research defense of those committed to truth. Peter Veach has written, I enjoyed my time in Adventism. E.G. White was my first step out of the church. Eventually, I left religion entirely. Do you think you might do the same?
talking to me or to you?
Yeah, I think to you.
I, you know, I see this pattern with some of the people on my Facebook page that have left God and religion entirely. And that's not the same thing, obviously. You can leave religion and not leave God. But, I had a very powerful spiritual experience when I was just 16 years old. I wanted nothing to do with Adventism as a kid. It didn't appeal to me. My life was sports, and this experience was outside of Adventism, and it really convinced me God was real, and it connected me in a spiritual way that has never changed in my life and will never change. I've had several other experiences in my life that where I have absolutely no doubt that God is real, and that God is a loving, caring being. Nothing to do with Adventism. To me, Adventism is a cult. and doesn't have a healthy picture of God that it teaches, especially as a system. But I will never leave my faith in God, in Christ. That's the most powerful thing in my life, and there's no possible way I would leave that. It's the essence of who I am, and so I definitely understand why many people who leave Adventism then go away from God or away from religion in general. And I totally respect them for their decisions and where they're coming from. But that's just not me. I'm a very spiritual person, and I think there's a lot of problems with Christianity. So I consider myself a Jesus follower, and I don't go for denominations or that kind of stuff generally. I just believe in trying to follow Jesus and living the life he calls us to.
I want to get on to Norman Doughty's book now. I'll just bring up one more comment, though. Peter has added Ray and Numbers, heroes. And
Agree.
of
I
course,
agree.
Ray has passed on, but Ron Numbers is still with us. Are you friends with Ron? Because his book...
Yeah, he was on my reading committee for my psychobiography. He gave me great input. I really like Numbers.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic book. Prophetess of Health or Health Prophetess?
Prophetess of Health, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic...
like 2 or 3 revisions now.
Yeah, the latest one is really good. It's got some added bonus material. I'd love to get him back on the show, actually.
Well,
And you were mentioning Dale Ratzlaff before. He has mentioned, I've heard him say a few times, that Adventism almost wires people in a way that when they leave the church, they often become agnostic,
yeah.
or atheist. And you've been in touch with him recently too.
Yes. He's, Life Assurance Ministry is planning on publishing this new book.
Yeah. And we've got Connie French watching. Great to hear your testimony to faith in God, Steve. And thanks, Connie. Great to have you watching the program. And so let's talk a little bit about a case of DM Canright. Can you tell us a little bit about who Norman Doughty was and a little bit about this book? And then I want to get into I was Canright's secretary and your new book. But I want to reflect a little bit on Norman because he's quite unknown in many ways within Adventist circles.
Yeah, I mean, Adventist, he was never mentioned in any of my courses. And, I had graduate level courses and even in history and Adventism. And none of my professors ever mentioned him, which is remarkable to me when I've come to realize who he was. And like I say, without his research, I could have never written the book that we're writing. And he was a very meticulous scholar, a very careful person. He'd written other books. He'd written other books on Adventism. He contacted Arthur White, and Arthur White took him to task for, wanting to quote Canright, and wrote him all these letters saying what a dismissed character Canright was. And, and Doughty knew better. And so he decided to write this book, The Case of D.M. Canright. And it's by far the best book written about Canright. It's an excellent book. And I wasn't able to find any errors in it. He's just very meticulous, very, very scholarly. I love the way he wrote the book, and he's a very, very careful person. I'm probably more outspoken than Doughty would have been. Doughty just seemed like he was very, very cautious and always wanting to document everything, just like when Carrie Johnson came to his home and talked for 7 hours. They meticulously documented the whole conversation. Then he sent her the notes and said, make any corrections or revisions that you see. And at that point, she realized she was done, that she's shot from the hip. I mean, she wasn't. And anyone who would go around saying, go to the family of Canright's own family and tell them that he had a peg leg when you worked for him, when they're his own family and knew with an absolute fact and certainty that he did not have a peg leg. I mean, that's the thing that really completely dumped her down the toilet. She made one error after the next, and she demonstrated she was a complete pathological liar and sociopath. But that one lie, that he had a peg leg when she worked for him, and of course she claimed she worked for him 3 different times, and they all proved to be false. But that was the most ridiculous lie she ever told, was that Canright had a peg leg when she worked for him. Because, it's possible for a person to have an artificial leg and you might not know it because they have pants on or something. But if a person has a peg leg when they really have 2 healthy legs, that's fairly obvious that you never saw the person or knew the person. And that's the thing that really gave her away as a complete fraud. And she had tried to do research on Canright, and she was no researcher. She heard some rumors that he'd lost his leg in his father's hayfield, which was a rumor in the family and that had gone around. And of course, the family members knew that rumor, and they realized that's what she'd latched onto. And so she was completely exposed as a fraud just from that one fact alone. But Canright, if it wasn't for Doughty documenting all this stuff, he documented all the letters that she wrote to Canright's family, telling them he had a peg leg. He documented how she told him Canright had a peg leg in that 7-hour conversation. If all that stuff hadn't been documented, there would have been no way of proving that she was a pathological liar with regard to the peg leg. And so we really own a great debt of gratitude to Doughty for documenting all that stuff and allowing us to expose Carrie for who she was.
It's interesting. Moto Sapien, a regular viewer of the program, is highlighting something here that shows that these lies keep getting perpetuated. Even the Wikipedia link has that he'd had a leg
Yeah,
amputated.
he did, of course, have a leg amputated right before he died. He had a bad fall.
Right.
That was later on after Carrie claimed to work for him. And that's when he fell in the basement of the church that it was being remodeled
Right.
shortly before he died. And they did have to amputate a leg based on that injury. But that had absolutely nothing to do with the rumor that he'd lost a
Yeah.
leg in his father's hayfield as a kid, which
Yeah.
that had been another member of the Canright family. So Carrie just confused the stuff she was trying to put together, but she didn't talk about it being stuff she'd researched. She said she saw it herself.
Yes. Yeah.
She completely exposed herself as a complete liar.
Just quick onto your new book with Nancy, and then I want to go back a little bit to Doughty. Did you, in putting the book together, did you talk to any of Canright's family that are still alive today?
No, I haven't. I felt like all the information and stuff I had, I'd like to. I've had a member of William Gage's family, contact me on the thread, and he's talked about how
What's
their
his connection?
William Gage.
Mm.
William Gage was the mayor of Battle Creek that Ellen White completely trashed and basically destroyed his life. And one of the members of his family has contacted me on the thread, and said, "You wouldn't believe what devastation that has done to our whole family history.
Wow.
Uh, it's just been a tragic thing for the whole family, what she did to William, who was the most prominent member of their family." And of course, D.M. Canright was the most prominent member of the Canright family.
Yeah.
So I've encouraged anyone who's still out there, Canrights, to contact me and let me know, if they have, because I don't know who to contact. If I had
Mm.
someone that I could talk to that would give me that kind of history, I would.
Wouldn't that
But
be good to have some quote or comment from one of the family members before the book's printed and included?
yeah,
It'd be great. Yeah.
I've tried to. I talked to Nancy about that, and I just don't know if they've completely disassociated from the whole thing, which is almost what you have to do when you have a family member assassinated in
Mm.
their reputation that way. But I'd be glad for anyone who has any information on who I could contact. I'd be glad to contact them. I
Yeah.
just
Back to Doughty for a minute. This book here, um, he he, as you were saying, he writes in a careful way. You were saying you were a little bit more outspoken in your critique. Um, did he have the same kind of ad hominem attack? You know, attacking the player, not the ball, post the release of this book in 1964 that others have received?
Yeah, of course, he wasn't an Adventist, so he wasn't an insider, and most
Right.
Adventists weren't even aware of his book. Arthur White was aware of it, and Carrie, they were both quite fearful because of her 7-hour interview with him. They both threatened him that he was not to use their names in the book, or they would sue him. Um, they did everything they could to suppress the book after it came to market and basically threatened Doughty with lawsuits and things. So he was faced with the difficult situation of having to go up a whole denomination of lawyers versus one poor minister. So
Mm.
the book was taken off the market quickly. Adventists weren't aware of it. It's been reprinted later on,
Oh,
but and it's available for free now on the internet. But it wasn't available for years and years and
really?
years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, Carrie and Arthur saw to that because the book does tremendous damage to them.
Mm.
Uh, Even though he doesn't mention their names, um, he gives information that exposes, the fact that Carrie made up this lie about the peg leg, for example.
Yeah.
He
Wow.
just refers to someone who claimed to be Canright's secretary.
Mm.
And um, so basically, they intimidated him and threatened him, and he had his book go off the market quite quickly. And so she had free reign with her book, and the Adventist Church promoted it like mad, and she was a featured camp meeting
Yes.
speaker all over the
Yeah.
place. And so she became an Adventist celebrity, and they didn't really have to worry about Doughty. So now they're getting their comeuppance.
Yes. My friend Adrian Anderson sent me a link to an interview that was had with her at a camp meeting, I believe.
Right.
That's still available online. I can find it. Or Adrian, if you're watching, can you share it in the comments? Um,
Yeah. It's
and
been
at
on
the
my
end of
thread.
it, what was that?
It's been on my thread, and a
That's
lot of
where I
people
saw it.
watched
That's
it.
right. That's where I saw it. Yeah, thanks for posting that. And Adrian, thank you for directing me to it. Because at the end of it, she starts talking. Well, that you can tell they're leading the witness. They've
Absolutely.
latched onto that. She saw a mist around him, and they start to bring in this demonic realm,
Right,
which
right.
is just silly. But boy, they were just shooting him down, and again, never really ever refuting his claims, just attacking
Yeah,
him like crazy.
absolutely. Well, yeah, you don't have to refute someone's claims when you prove they're demon possessed, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah, but as soon as someone resorts to that, it's a great sign and a signal that your argument is winning.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, Someone has written Ford Ray Numbers Daily, The Shakers. And don't forget, if you're watching on Facebook, just include your name in the comment because we can't see it here on our thread going live. Okay, was there anything else you wanted to say about Doughty? If not, we'll move into a little bit of a discussion about the Carrie book.
Yeah, one of the things I'd say is I have Doughty's book, which is still in great shape, and I've been through this thing over and over and over again. Then I've got Carrie's book, which is completely held together by tape. It's just
You know
it,
what's funny is mine is as well. It's falling to bits.
yeah, this thing is just like
Yours is more worn than mine.
yeah, it's completely fallen apart, and I think it's symbolic. You know that the one book is solid, and the other book is just a complete fabrication of garbage. It's
Literally.
pretty funny.
When I read this years ago when I was a young Adventist, and it kind of shocked me in a way, and the job they intended was done.
Yes.
However, when I read Walter Ray's The White Lie, which I've just got in the background there on the shelf, that rocked me. That shook me. I couldn't even read it. I had to stop reading it. It was so unsettling to me at the time. And a lot of younger Adventists, it wouldn't shock them so much because um, some of them have not been raised in a way to fully believe that Ellen was just given these words direct from God. Uh,
Right.
but to my generation and older, we were taught that these were just the rays of light channeled through Ellen straight into Desire of Ages, etc.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
those
so
were Ellen's own claims too.
what was that?
And those were Ellen's own
They were
claims.
her claims as well, and that's the most troubling fact.
Yes.
So when I literally just had this book lying around here when I was doing my podcast, and when I saw Nancy Page and someone say that she was the granddaughter, we started chatting, and she is on season 2, episode 69. If people want to go back and listen to that interview, and
Cool.
I listened to it again the other day, just preparing for today, and yeah, I think hopefully I've become a better interviewer since then. I kept cutting her off and whatnot, but if you quickly forward wind anything I say, it's a really interesting interview. So I'm looking forward to having both her and you back on when the book comes out. But yeah, just share a couple of thoughts uh, from the book that stand out as completely inconsistent with reality, and
Yeah.
then let's talk about your new project with Nancy.
Well, her book, it's obvious that you see Arthur White's hand all over this. Um, Clearly, what happened was when she came to Arthur White in 1950 and claimed this story, he was salivating. Oh boy, I'm going to get at my lifelong enemy, and you know for the first 10 years there, it's like he's realizing, holy Toledo, this woman's got all kinds of holes, all kinds of problems. She needs to get more information. Um, he's troubled clearly that she doesn't she isn't who she claimed to be, and I think he knew that very well. But he realized that she was willing to play the part, and it was a part he very much wanted played to try to destroy Canright. So he became the you know force behind Carrie, and so much of the stuff that's in the book is stuff he clearly told her, and historical filler and things that she never would have written. When I look at the manuscripts Nancy sent me of Carrie, she was anything but a trained secretary. It's just a joke. She lied about everything, her training, everything. I mean, the woman, like Doughty said, she was a pathological liar who would lie even for no reason, even when it served no purpose, she'd lie. And,
Wow.
and that's just amazing about her is that she was such a sociopath. But when you look at her arguments in the book, they're trying to as subtly destroy Canright as they possibly can. And then they left the most devastating things to be done on her camp meeting circuit that were the things that were just the most outrageous. So all the stuff about demonized and him being completely indigent and dependent on the Adventist church to survive, and all these complete ridiculous lies that were the most flagrant were all emphasized on the camp meeting circuit, where all the Adventists were eager to hear this stuff about their worst enemy, of course. So they're gobbling it up like mad. But Arthur tries to make the book as palatable as he can while insinuating all this stuff. And he does put in all the lies about Canright being a broken man and crying all the time. And, I longing to get back to Adventism, but he's a lost man. He's a lost man, and Arthur quotes this stuff himself. That's what he said to Doughty in his letters, that I have the correspondence of his secretary documenting that he knew he was a lost man and all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
So Arthur bought into that stuff and put it in the book. But Arthur was quite careful and protective of the most extreme stuff, and keeping that out of the book, but then letting Carrie
Kept that for the live shows.
right. The live shows, it much more difficult to sue them and that kind of thing over the live camp meeting speaking.
Mm.
So
Someone has just written. They've just said, "Who is she that you're talking about? Are you calling Ellen White a liar?" So obviously they haven't been following the conversation. But
Carrie Johnson.
we're talking about Carrie Johnson, to the person that just asked, and she's the author of this book. I was Canright's secretary. Instead of unpacking what we're talking about, when you get a chance, Zachariah, go back and watch the whole interview when we're finished. But enjoy it. Hang around, keep watching.
But if he wants me to, I will call Ellen White a liar too.
yeah. And Zachariah's just written thanks. So watch on and go and listen to some other interviews that I've done with Steve as well. And he's just responded to your last comment. Jim Fitzsimmons has just commented, the church could have been more compassionate regardless of their viewpoint. Okay, so tell us when Adrian, actually, I had not been following Facebook for a little while for some reason, and he said, "Oh, you've got to go and see," because normally I read your Steve daily posts and comments, and so I went and played catch up. And he said, "You've got to go and see what's going on there. Nancy and Steve are going to be putting a book out." And one of the things that really shocked me to start with was this idea that you were both proposing, that she may have never even met him.
Right.
I originally thought, well, she met him, she was secretary for a short time, she's extrapolated all this other crazy stuff, she's played into the hands of Arthur.
Right.
What evidence do you have that she never even met him?
Well, the most absolute evidence, of course, is her claim that he had a peg leg when she worked for him. That's 100% not true. It's provably true.
See, I just
Doughty
took that as that he had a wonky leg, that she was mistakenly calling it a peg leg. But the evidence you've uncovered shows that she was really referring to a peg leg that was
absolutely
potentially a rumor from late that hadn't
right.
hadn't
That
even
he had a
happened yet.
peg leg, and he lost his leg. And she made this very comment that he lost his leg in his
Okay,
father's hayfield when he was a kid.
right. So she's
So
perpetuating a rumor that had come about even after she would have had met him.
right, right. So she completely bought into that rumor, claimed that it was fact as she saw it and knew him, And all the stuff she said about seeing him in the cafeteria and being indigent and being homeless and being dependent on Adventist for food and all the stuff she made up about him is completely discredited by this claim that he had a peg leg when he did not have a peg.
Did they give him an office there, um, on
Yeah,
those grounds,
yeah,
and he would actually go to it to work?
yeah. He would eat there and stuff,
Yeah.
but there's it's clear that Carrie, found out enough stuff about him that she then puts it into the first person, kind of like Ellen White did. She plagiarized from all these books, and then she puts it into the first person, like she's seeing it in vision. Um, Carrie was doing the same thing,
Thing.
uh, you know, finding out as much as she could, and her huge mistake was completely buying into the peg leg nonsense. If she would have had a brain, she would have just left that out because that certainly wasn't necessary or helpful to her.
Is
You
there a
know,
chance that she was at the campus at the time and had seen him walking around? Is there an allegation that she never even saw him, or that it's that she didn't meet him, or that she never was his secretary?
I I would argue that she never even saw him as a person.
Right.
That you can't say that you see someone with a peg leg who has two normal, healthy legs and walks normally.
Mm,
Uh, so she clearly made this stuff up, and then with all the other evidence that she's just playing a pathological liar that gets documented again and again and again and again and again with every aspect of everything she says. You know,
I might
it's not hard to see that
be
this woman just fabricates stuff.
I might be wrong, but I have a memory that Nancy and I talked about she may not have even been in that part of the world at the time of her claim, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Nancy clearly shows that Canright's wife died the very day that Carrie claims he met with her, and you
Mm,
know there's just all kinds of lies there that pile one on the other, and her claims about going to the school, calling it a college when it wasn't, that this guy Cornell would have hired her. It's a total joke. Cornell would have done any Canright secretarial work that needed himself, but he already had a secretary who was his next door neighbor. I
mm,
mean, there's just so many ridiculous things. She claims he's this indigent homeless person, but he has a personal secretary. How
mm,
many homeless people do you know that have personal secretaries? I mean, there's just so many things that are ridiculous when
mm,
you really unpack her story. That it's like Doughty says, she's a pathological liar who lies even for no reason at all.
mm, mm,
She's uh, a completely person with no credibility. And Arthur White learned more and more and more that was the case, but he was so invested that he had to keep covering for her and trying to make her stuff as palatable as he possibly could. And the amazing thing was that they pulled it off.
mm, mm,
They pulled it off for all these years, from 1971 to 1923. That's a long time. It's a lot like Ellen White pulled it off for not only her lifetime, but more than a century after. Obviously from the 70s on, the questions have been stronger and stronger and stronger about Ellen White. And the 1919 stuff getting buried was huge.
mm,
But
mm,
but you really had the dark ages of Adventism between 1919 and 1974 until those minutes were rediscovered, and then
mm,
numbers wrote his book, and things have been unraveling ever since the mid 70s,
mm,
but they're just going to get worse and worse. It's a lot like Watergate. The people that were invested in Nixon had to keep denying until the noose finally cut off their oxygen. And the same with Biden. The Biden family is being shown to be completely corrupt, and
Mm.
the evidence was out there in the banking records today. But the people will just keep trying to hold on to their benefits until the noose cuts off their oxygen. And that's what's happening in Adventism. The evidence just keeps accumulating, and you can deny because you get some kind of benefit from the lies of Adventism. But eventually the noose will tighten and the oxygen will get cut off.
Mm. Jim Zeiderfeld has written, or might she have known him, but put the peg leg in, like we see in today's journalism, to add drama.
Well, that was mighty stupid of her if she did. And obviously, Arthur White, when he came to realize that she'd stuck that in, realized that would completely kill them, and made sure it didn't go in the book, because that was the kind of thing that completely destroyed her credibility.
Tell us some other things that are notable in the book that we may be surprised to learn, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
sharing.
I think the two big things are that have never been really exposed are the fact that the book was a complete total fabrication, and that Carrie never even met Canright, never even saw the guy in person. And the other thing is the intimate role that Arthur White played, more than 20 years working behind the scenes, denying his role in the theft of the diary, uh, lying to his own staff in order to keep that diary. Arthur White just comes out, to me, he comes out even way worse than Carrie Johnson, because Carrie Johnson's just plain a sociopath who would do anything for attention, and she wanted whatever fame and money she could get. But Arthur White was a person who had position, he had status, he had it made really as head of the White estate, and he risks all that for his own hatred for Canright, basically. He risks everything to try to destroy Canright, and in so doing, he ultimately destroys himself, because his reputation is now destroyed. What he did over those 21 years shows him to be anything but what he claimed to be, this open, honest, objective scholar. It's just 100% the opposite, that he would do anything to deceive and lie. And when you look at the importance of Canright now, instead of being this great villain that Adventists have invested so much in, now Canright comes out as this great man of integrity, that he was right, and that Adventism is the villain. Adventism is the one that has done all the evil and lying and deceitfulness, and they've done it at all levels, not just Carrie Johnson and Arthur White, but the Review and Herald, their whole publishing work, their whole church hierarchy, their whole PR machine that pushed Carrie all over the church and the book all over the church. And so Adventism really, all this does is cement the kind of stuff about Ellen White that's in my psychobiography, that, the beginnings of Adventism were as cultic as you can possibly get. I mean, that it was as cultic as you can possibly be, to see what Ellen was those first 7 years, what they taught, what they believed. And Canright knew that, and they, of course, had to discredit him. And Ellen's dishonesty with Canright, and then how the whole church dogpiled on that and was so dishonest as well. But Canright was the first major person to expose Ellen White as a fraud and as a plagiarist, and the things that that were actually published and the world became aware of. So you can see why the church was so invested in trying to discredit Canright. And now we can reverse the tables and say, no, Canright was a man of great integrity.
Mm.
The church's fault that he ever published anything about them, but what he published was true. And what the church has done is inexcusable. And
Mm.
it's going to be really interesting to see how they own up to this, if they own up to it at all.
Mm.
Adventism's tendency is to deny and lie and deny and lie. And in this case, the evidence is so overwhelming. I won't be terribly surprised if some of them throw Arthur under the bus,
Mm.
because throwing Arthur under the bus isn't nearly as traumatic as throwing Ellen under the bus.
Mm.
If you throw Ellen under the bus, the whole system goes to hell. But you could throw Arthur under the bus and say, oh, this is inexcusable what he did, but he's only Arthur White. He's not Ellen White. He's not the prophet founder. So it'll be interesting to see what the White Estate does. And I've challenged the White Estate in the book to, own up to their role and what happened with Canright. But
When I was just thinking there when we're talking about people being discredited um, without refuting claims. I remember with Walter Ray's book, The White Lie, they did a reply at the time, which I think they regretted, called The White Truth.
right,
I remember reading that, and it raised more questions than it answered for me.
Robertson's book, yeah, it's a
and
joke.
and with Des Ford down the track, there were people claiming he was devil possessed, and there's a
Right,
chat going around where a lady that was having an exorcism was saying that it was the demons had possessed Des or something like that. They seem to love getting. I've even been called the tool of Satan. They seem to love extrapolating to the nth degree that you're working for the devil. Has that happened to you yet?
oh yeah. We've had apologists on my thread that say I'm of the devil and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, that's Ellen White's thing. The bright lights will go out, and
Yeah.
Ellen was very quick to demonize people herself.
I like how you mentioned that in the Steve Hassan interview. You called it, it was a really good term, immunizing.
Yes,
She
right,
immunized the church to anyone that was going to fall away by saying it's going to happen, as if they can then go, oh, yeah, yeah, that's come true.
right. That's her one prophecy that they try to latch on to.
Yeah,
But
tell us a little bit more about Arthur and the obtaining or stealing of the diary, the Canright diary. How did he successfully do that?
yeah, what happened was he had worked with Carrie for almost more than 10 years, and he realized, her story is just not coming together. Let's just pretend that she actually was Canright's secretary. You know, you get someone like Arthur White working with you, and you can put out a book in 2 years. I mean, a small book like this, if you can't put it out in 2 years when it's coming out of a person's actual life experience, then you got incompetent people there. But here it is more than 10 years, and they're not getting it together because Carrie's story is not holding up. And Arthur realizes that. He's seeing the holes. He doesn't research the peg leg thing himself, which he should have, because that would have saved him tremendous grief. But instead, he lets her go out and tell this to Doughty and tell it to Canright's family. And that's the thing that actually showed Doughty for sure that she was a pretender and a liar. But basically, Arthur sees that we need more information here. We can't write a book with the crap you're giving me. And, and I think Arthur knew himself that she was never Canright's secretary because it was pretty obvious. And so he's telling her she needs to get this diary. And so she needs to pretend to be a great fan of Canright's and meet Canright's family and win their trust. And borrow the diary, anything she can get in the way of documents, personal documents. And so that's what she does. And she fools, the family into thinking that she really is a great fan of Canright and wants to write things that are going to lift him up and support him. She's completely lying, and not telling them of her SDA connections and all this stuff. Or they never would have even talked to her, much less allowed her to see a diary, much less allowed her to borrow a diary. But she gets it under complete false pretenses. And then she immediately takes it to Arthur White, which was their plan. And this is a very clever thing that they do. She gives it to Arthur White. So she claims that she doesn't have possession anymore, that the White estate has possession. And then when Doughty provides them with all the information, that this was stolen, and the White estate people all agree to it except Arthur White, because they don't know Arthur's involvement. Then Arthur claims, oh no, this still belongs to Carrie Johnson. So they're both claiming they don't own the diary and they don't have the ability to give it back. So the White estate just keeps it all these years, and they still have it. There's documentation that they still have it in the Andrews vault. But, this is just flagrant, gross dishonesty, stealing a family's diary, a famous person's diary, misusing it. They wouldn't let Doughty take notes on it. They wouldn't let him copy anything from it because they wanted deniability. Well, he can say whatever.
You tried to go and see it yourself?
No, because Doughty already did that. He went in and he documented that there was nothing in that diary that was at all harmful to Canright.
Okay.
All the stuff they claimed was based on that diary was pure fiction.
Oh, wow.
All lies.
Be great for the family to get, hopefully one of them will get in touch with you and you can say, hey, go and reclaim your birthright. Go and get the diary back.
Absolutely. And I even think Nancy would have some argument as the granddaughter. They claim, that that this was the possession of Carrie Johnson. So Nancy should have an argument that the diary belongs to her then, if they're claiming it's not their property, but it's Carrie Johnson's property, then she is entitled to it.
Yeah.
And
so I suggested that to her yet? That'd be a good.
Yeah, I mentioned it. I hope she'll do it. I'd like to see her do that.
I'll just bring in some comments again. We've got one here from Planmeister. Walter Ray's work led nearly directly to Fred Veltman's research project on the Desire of Ages, which I am slowly trying to put together a program on that. And just as a quick aside, and I think Larry might be watching today, Larry A. Mitchell, if you look at season 2, episode 84, I did a fantastic interview with Dr. Larry A. Mitchell, hoping to get him back on the program. And we spend a bit of time in that interview talking about the Fred Veltman 8-year study paid for by the Adventist Church and readily available online still at the moment. So I'm trying to do an episode on that. I don't know if you want to join in with that one, if you know too much about it.
About Veltman's study?
Yeah, about the Veltman study. Did you want to comment on that at all? Because it's a bit of an aside, but whenever I chat to people that know about it, I like to pick their brain a little bit.
I mean, it's a very careful study, 8 years for just the selected chapters he did. And Veltman was one of my teachers at PUC and one of my favorite teachers and the only teacher I really liked there at PUC when I was there my freshman year. Right. But he was my Greek teacher, and he was a straightforward, honest guy way back then, But 31%, he says, documented plagiarism. But, the thing that Adventists always ignore is that the content is derived. She disguised a lot of her plagiarism. but the content is derived in the Great Controversy from other sources. It's not original. It's not her stuff.
Mm.
So that's the critical thing, and that's the way she operated. She operated by deriving stuff from others and then attributing it to God.
Mm.
And this was her pattern, whole lifetime pattern in her writing. And Veltman, was as careful as he possibly could be. And obviously his neck was on the line. And so he tried to be as careful as he could. And I have great respect for what he did. And the church basically tried to bury it. They stuck an
Mhm.
article in ministry and stuff, but
Mm.
he didn't say what they wanted him to say, obviously.
I think from memory, and I can't remember if it was with Larry's interview or not, the actual full-length study wasn't made available unless you
Right,
paid
right,
for it, and it might
right.
have been like $500 back to the 80s.
Right.
The summary was available in the Ministry mag. Did you say Ministry magazine?
Ministry magazine,
Yeah,
yeah.
but only to the subscribers, and they
Right,
were only Adventist ministers. And in the Ministry magazine made to the general public, there was the one paragraph which basically
yes.
was like, "Oh, phew, we've been able to confirm that only 2% was word for word plagiarized."
Right, right. It's just such a joke.
Oh,
It's so dishonest. It's just the way Adventists are, when I started at Central California, my first year in ministry there was when Numbers book had just come out, and I read it as soon as it came out, and I take it with me to camp meeting, and it's in my pouch, and the conference president, Cook, gets up, and he says, I know some of you have probably heard about Ron Numbers' book. You're forbidden to read that book. No one is to read Ron Numbers' book,
wow.
but you are all required to read this rebuttal to Numbers' book, which they all hand out to us. So we're required to read the rebuttal and tell the church members what the rebuttal says, but none of us are allowed. Of course, I didn't tell them I had Numbers' book right there and I'd already read it, but I mean, this kind of garbage is just so typical of Adventism.
Just holding up the Ronald Numbers book as you're mentioning it.
Yeah, it looks well used.
This is my copy. It's one of the first ones, and I got it from my parents who'd bought it back in the day. And
And he's the best historian the church has ever produced, even though he's not an Adventist anymore. That's
it's such a good book. It's
yeah.
such a good read. And this, I've got the DM Canright one there of
Yes.
the life of Mrs. E.G. White. Her
Amen.
false claims refuted, and I do have the Adventism renounced there somewhere. Um, quick, while I'm holding up books, quick plug too for Ostriches and Canaries by Gil Valentine, who will be on the show hopefully soon. That's a book that kind of helps to put a lot of this into perspective. And also, just I didn't realize when I read earlier, Planmeister is Larry A. Mitchell. So Larry's watching, and that's his YouTube channel name. So,
Yeah.
did you know each other? Have you met? Are you peers?
I think I did meet Larry at meetings once, but
Because he is saying here also that it was his favourite PUC Religion Department faculty member and mentor. Called me to his appointment somewhere there,
yeah.
in the department. Um, just so I'm glad you're with us, Larry. Thank you for joining the program. CMP, the ambassador, has written, "You haven't made it until you've been called a Jesuit or an agent of Satan."
Absolutely.
I've been called both. Now, Jim Fitzsimmons has asked a bit of a challenge here. Could it be, Steve, that you have an obsession with the freckles of Ellen White and ignore the spiritual contribution she has made to millions of believers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, people always bring that up about what about all the educational institutions and health institutions, and you have the same thing with Joseph Smith and Mormonism and all the positive things that have come out of Mormonism. And I'm the first one to say there's a lot of positive things that have come out of Adventism and Mormonism. That doesn't make Joseph Smith a true prophet, nor does it make Ellen White a true prophet. Both of these people were pretenders. And that doesn't mean that God doesn't overcome evil with good. It doesn't mean that God hasn't done a lot of good things through Adventism and Mormonism, both. It doesn't mean there aren't a lot of great people in both movements. Both systems, I think, have super problems. And one of the things I'm looking at, I think the Mormons are actually more open than the Adventists are nowadays, because at least they have a living prophet so they can change. And Adventism has to keep holding on to this dead prophet and try to justify, the lies and the cover-ups. And Adventism's in a more, I think, dishonest place than even Mormonism is now, because the Mormons are at least trying to deal with some of their stuff and admit to it and be honest about it.
Yeah,
But Adventists don't. I mean, they're just,
I was listening to two Mormon apologists the other day, and there was an interview where someone was speaking out against Mormonism, and the person interviewing them was talking about some of the crazy Joseph Smith stuff. And
right.
they just went, yeah, so what? That's okay. He was a very colourful person.
Yes.
And, yeah, he got into trouble and he did these terrible things, and so what? And it kind of stumped the interviewer.
Yeah, he didn't make as ridiculous of claims as Ellen did in terms of just getting these ridiculous downloads of every subject possible for her whole lifetime and stuff. I mean, that stuff's really ridiculous when you stop and analyze it.
And Kent Campbell, hey Kent, good to have you watching the program, has said Carrie's acquisition of the diary under false pretenses was done in the great tradition of Adventism. Evangelism under false pretenses of sponsorship for the first several weeks of a
Absolutely.
Revelation seminar.
Absolutely. I saw that many times.
And Larry has asked, did Steve work in the Carmichael Church?
I was a member of the Carmichael Church. My parents attended there. I wasn't a pastor there.
And someone else, Jim Zeideveld, has written, we can be funny as a church. In 1977 at division meetings, I listened to the division president preach against the evils of facial hair. Two of us in the hundreds present had beards. Peter Veach has written, could Ellen's visions be totally imagined?
Yes. I think there's really only two possibilities. Well, you also have the emotional, many people who've analyzed her think it was a psychosomatic kind of process. And of course, you have those who claim it was a brain injury that caused them. But the only other options are that spiritual forces from the dark side had something to do with them, and that they were completely fabricated. And there are many cases where it's quite obvious that she fabricated them, especially when they just were so convenient. She's in an argument, someone's challenging her. The next day, God showed her a vision, they're going to hell. I mean, this kind of stuff happened all throughout her lifetime. So I really do believe that whatever visionary experiences she had initially in the Shouting Methodist movement, which was quite an unhealthy movement, and then with Israel Damon and his crazy unhealthiness. Of course, Israel rejected her visions as false himself. So even a fanatic like Israel Damon saw that her claims were false. But, whatever early kind of emotional visionary stuff she had going, whether it was spiritual or emotional, psychological, whatever, I definitely believe she learned how to manufacture her stuff. And even her first vision in Adventism, in December of 1844, was plagiarized from Joseph Turner. She took the paper he had written, read it in her home, denied reading it, and then gave this first vision, where then Joseph Turner comes. He didn't hear her give the vision, but she tells him the next day what she said, and he said, "Oh, that's just what was in my paper." And so, she got in this habit of stealing stuff and claiming God gave it to her very early on, and it was her pattern throughout her whole life. And once she gets this prophetic status where people think she's getting downloads from God 24/7, she just conveniently claims to get stuff from God whenever it's needed, whether it's justifying James' embezzlement, whether it's justifying the tithe system that they brought in 1858. Just one example after the next. It's
And
very
sometimes
clear.
those people that she had just copied from, instead of going, "Hey, you stole my idea," they go, "Oh, wow, that confirms it because you just had the same thing as I just did."
Precisely. Precisely.
Uh,
Yeah.
Zachariah has just not familiar with the numbering system. How do I look it up? We're talking about Ron Numbers, as in the person. His last name
Yes.
is Numbers.
Yes.
It's a book that he's written called The Prophetess of Health. Question here from Brazil. Hello, Peter and Dr. Steve. A quick question. In Brazil, people believe that Kellogg left the church because of differences of beliefs. Does Ellen G. White, uh, does she have anything to say, or did she have anything to do with his departure, leaving Adventism?
Yeah, she had everything to do with it. She made all kinds of false accusations against him. They disfellowshipped him. you know, it wasn't like he left the church. They disfellowshipped him. And it was all based on lies that Kellogg documented and demonstrated were lies. And she had visions that she claimed he built buildings in Chicago that were never built, and just all kinds of ridiculous stuff that, demonstrated how Ellen White fabricated visions that simply weren't true. And then, of course, she accused Kellogg of being a pantheist, which he 100% denied. And if you read his book, The Living Temple, he
Mm,
wasn't a pantheist. I mean, this is the typical Adventist thing. When someone becomes persona non grata, they just make up a bunch of lies about them.
mm, mm,
And that's what they did with Kellogg, because they wanted to steal as much of the health work as they could. It
mm.
had a lot to do with money. And Kellogg was the one that documented the embezzlement of James White, both from the Review and Herald and from the sanitarium. So if it
That
wasn't for
again?
Kellogg,
Say that
what
again. Say that again, what you just said.
Kellogg was the one that absolutely documented James White's embezzlement, which was to the tune of approximately 200 to 250,000 in our money today from the sanitarium.
Can you
And
unpack that a little bit? I have heard you talk about that before, but I just wanted you to give me a refresher.
yeah, when you look at his interview, his documented interview, which he made sure was, witnessed and documented by a notary republic and the whole thing, because he distrusted Adventism so much. He goes into great detail about how he exposed James' embezzlement. And when James was on his deathbed, James admitted to the whole thing and said he planned on paying it back, and um, it was wrong what he did. And then James kind of miraculously recovered and demanded the money back.
Oh,
And so, you know, Kellogg says, "I'm not giving that money back. You stole it from the sand and you admitted it."
how
And
did he steal it?
he embezzled that he was on the board and stuff, and he like borrowed it but never gave the money back. And
Right.
he owed it to the sand. And then when he got the money back, he paid off the Review and Herald that he'd done the same thing to. So
How did he justify it at the time?
well, he didn't justify it when he was on his deathbed because he didn't want to be held accountable for it. He admitted that it was wrong.
Right.
But then when he recovered, Ellen has a vision showing he's right. And then after James actually dies, Kellogg takes all the documentation to the church, and they're forced to pay the sand back. He said, I'm going to go public with this. I'm going to, you know, go to the general conference with this. And so they secretly paid him all back. And this is all documented in the interview and stuff.
Mm,
But James is a proven embezzler, and Ellen's a proven enabler of his embezzlement through her claimed visions. And it's some
mm.
sick stuff.
Dave Edgren has asked, in your study, have you come to an understanding of what generated such a plethora of creative spiritual leaders, prophets, a new understanding, teaching of the Bible? What was going on that made this a reasonable thing to do?
During the 19th century?
I'm thinking, yes, around that time of.
Yeah, I mean, you had Mormons, Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Christian Science, just a whole plethora of cults and groups that came out of the woodwork during this period. And, I think it just had a lot to do with naivety, hope, people believing new ways in religious thought, that there was a new freedom about allowing that kind of thing in American culture. It was a very interesting period of change and transition in American culture. You have this transition from being a Protestant America to becoming a Christian America, with all the um, immigrants, Catholic immigrants coming into the country. So America's changing very rapidly. You have the Industrial Revolution. You have all kinds of change. So change kind of got given a new permission, where people were willing to try new things and look at new things. And all this prophetic stuff cropped up in connection with that. And, there was a lot of naivety and stuff that went with that. But many of the cults crashed and burned. But, when we think of Christian Science and Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, those are the ones that kind of survived. And later you have Scientology that comes out of the same kind of thinking, or same kind of dynamic. But, it's it was unique to that period. I don't think that kind of stuff, the whole notion of the Millerite movement happening now, is pretty laughable. That there would be a date set and people would all latch on to this as for the end of the world. That's cult thinking. And to have as wide acceptance of that as Millerite movement had tells a lot about the times.
Mm. This one here, Jim Zeiderfeld's asked, was the story genuine of her holding the Bible high for 30 minutes? Even weightlifters couldn't do that. Just wondering.
Yeah, I don't think any of the supernatural stuff that Adventists try to claim for Ellen White was valid.
I've read that that's just an urban myth.
Yeah, it's obviously not provable. And, from my perspective, if it did actually happen, it would have been demonic. I would have believed that it would have been demonic strength that would have enabled her to do that, not God doing it. That's just my personal bias. That I'm not saying she was demonic. I'm just saying that's an option that's out there. And when you look at all the different options, I'm much more willing to consider a dark side supernatural power that she may have had access to than I am that God actually did the stuff that she claimed.
There's something around that time with the book being raised, which is something she often did. There were, I think, at that meeting, there was a meeting and there was a Bible, but she didn't hold it up. But she did say that, oh, those two men over there, I saw in vision that they would be here. But then people say, oh, she saw it in vision. Same with, I think, maybe 1908 San Francisco earthquake. She walked amongst the rubble and said, oh, yes, I saw this in vision a couple of months ago. people say that, well, that's confirming. No,
Yeah, that's all been debunked, all that San Francisco earthquake
that's
stuff.
saying I could say, oh yeah, I'm hearing this right now, and I saw this in vision a few weeks ago.
Right.
Tell us a few weeks ago that it's going to happen.
Yeah,
Then
she
we'll be
got in the
yes,
habit of doing that kind of stuff.
yeah. Now I just wanted to pop this up. Test the Prophet. I love giving Test the Prophet a plug. You've said there you go through the chapter on my last video. If interested, when you say last video, have you released something in the last few weeks? Let me know. I love your stuff. Encourage people to go and see it. And Test the Prophet has written, I found all of her supernatural claims were performed by other young women at that time, including holding heavy objects as proof as their gift. That's interesting.
Yeah. Even Margaret Rowan did that stuff, the false prophet that claimed to follow Ellen. She had all this supernatural stuff she'd learned to do um, to try to convince Adventists that she was the successor of Ellen White.
Mm, mm. And Colin has said parlor tricks.
Yes.
And Larry has written a valuable volume, The Burned Over District,
Yes.
Social
Very
and
good.
Intellectual History of Enthusiastic Religion in Western New York.
Very good book.
And Answering Adventism. It was great to have Miles on the program last week, I think, and Colin a couple of weeks before that, and Dr. Alan Davis a couple of weeks before that. Those and yours now. There's 4 very interesting interviews in a row. Miles has written, right, the demonic had super strength. That isn't support or evidence for Ellen White being a valid prophet. I cringe when I hear them try and use this. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the, in closing, the book coming out soon with Nancy, or inspired by Nancy.
Yeah, it's with Nancy.
Yeah.
As I say, her large interviews, one of the appendixes, and she writes part of the preface with me, and then I refer to her throughout the book. So I refer to Ted a few times as well, her brother, but more than once I say, had it not been for Doughty, Nancy, and to a lesser degree Ted, the book would have never been written.
Have you decided on a title yet? And when do you think it's coming out?
Yeah, the White Estate Fraud, Seventh-day Adventism's Scandalous Untold Story is the subtitle. And it's going to be probably, I'm not exactly sure how long Dale said it's going to take him to print it, because we're just deciding on the printer now. But, maybe 3-4 months, something like that.
Okay.
I'm just getting him the final transcript and
Right.
stuff.
And Peter has said he's third of the way through your current book. We'll chase the new one when it's out. And just quickly bring up the image of your book there, Ellen G. White, A Psychobiography, available online at the moment. Yes, I've got the Kindle version, but you can get the paperback there still.
It's hardback too. Both are available.
Oh, right. Oh, good. And so those that are waiting for the new book and haven't read that book can go and do that in the meantime. What have we got here? Chris has written, has Daly ever looked into Francis Nichol and how he used Furkovich to defend the 1844 date?
Yeah, I've read Nichols' stuff. Especially I scrutinized his stuff on the shut door, because that's something that he was the major apologist against the shut door arguments. And he doesn't even deal with a bunch of the original documents. And he appeals to Ellen White's 1873 and 1884 denials, which are completely ridiculous because they're 100% contradictory to what she actually said between 1844 and 1851.
Mm.
And so Nickel, he was an apologist of all apologists, and he was as dishonest as he could be in terms of trying to frame Ellen in the best possible light and frame her critics in the worst possible light. And, it'd be one thing if he gave all the historical evidence and did that, but when he leaves out the crucial historical evidence and does that, that's quite annoying.
Mm. I remember in one of our interviews, I said to you, if Christ had returned within 7 years of 1844, then the whole investigative judgment and sanctuary doctrine makes sense. But the further away we get from 1844 and the imminent return not having occurred, it makes it less feasible.
Well, they didn't even have those doctrines between 1844 and 1851. Investigative judgment
Yeah,
was first mentioned in 1855.
not in
Uh,
word, but they definitely had this concept of 1844 and the new compartment and the new phase and the judgment and the shut door all would have made sense if Christ had returned within
yeah,
a short time after 1844.
yeah, it was getting increasingly uncomfortable. They had to embrace the 7-year theory of Bates to try to get people staying on board until
Mm,
1851. But, once she gets to August of 1851, and it becomes obvious that all the stuff she claimed and prophesied wasn't going to happen,
mm,
then she tries to start disclaiming it because she knows it's not going to happen.
mm.
And then they have to reinvent, what is the shut door? And that's when they come up with the door being shut from the holy place into the most holy place and investigative judgment and all this other garbage. That's
All
their
the back
replacement.
engineering.
Yeah, the sanctuary doctrine was their replacement for the false shut door teaching.
Mm. And we're, just it hit me then. We're only 21 years away from it being 200 years since 1844. I
Yeah.
wonder if Adventists will say, would they put, if, when will they stop calling it an imminent return? Like how many years need to unfold before it's no longer imminent? Because
Yeah,
at
for
some
sure.
point it's going to be,
Pretty
wow,
much a
this
joke.
is very much a non-feasible kind of doctrine, and yet
Yeah.
it's the only unique Adventist distinctive.
And just like the Sunday laws, they just won't let go of that, even though it becomes increasingly ridiculous with every passing day. I mean,
Yes, yes. In fact, you had a good comment about the Sunday laws in your Steve um, Hassan interview as well, which I thought was very interesting. I'll bring that up just quickly as well, so people can just have a look at.
yeah, he's considered the leading cold expert in the world today. So I was really
Oh,
happy to see him.
how great that you got on that show. And what an
Yeah.
honor for you to give us a plug as well. So that's the podcast that Steve was just on. And it's a really interesting interview. Highly recommend people go and check that out. And thanks, Peter Veach, for saying you're enjoying the interview. I am too. It's just time is flying by. I'm loving it so much. Always love chatting to Steve. Now, Zachariah has written, it's crazy. I find myself feeling the need to reinforce this new anti-Adventist mindset. You would think I've gathered enough info. Wow, what a stronghold it's had on me since 2004. So that's coming up to 20 years for you, Zachariah. I'm not sure if you're happy about it or not happy about it. It's certainly an intriguing topic, that's for sure. Dave Edgren has written, many other denominations believe Jesus is returning soon.
Sure. I, I,
And
I think,
all of
uh,
them will face this same quandary, because as time passes by, if he hasn't returned, how effective is your claim of the soon return, if that is one of your key components of your religion denomination?
yeah, I mean, the Bible calls us to have faith in his return in an hour that you think not, the Son of Man cometh. But all this date setting crap is another thing altogether. And in Ellen White's very first vision that she stole from Joseph Turner. She said, God showed me the specific day and hour of his coming. I mean,
Mm.
she just won't stop, and then in 1845, God showed me he's coming in June of this year. He'll be here by the end of June. Well, June passes, and well, what happened? How come he didn't come? Well, the angel told me in the language of Canaan.
Mm.
Oh, okay. What he really meant was it was the next harvest in September. He'll be here by September. So that fails again. So she didn't get over this date setting stuff. She does it in Spirit's Vision. She does it twice in 1845. She does it again when she embraces Joseph Bates' 7-year theory for October 22, 1851. And she even does it later on, in 1856, I think it was, when she said, I saw that some here would be translated that were in this meeting. And so
Yeah.
the Adventist Church holds on to this forever till
Yeah.
every single one of these people die, which is like after the turn of the
Yeah.
century. And she finally gets exposed as a liar again. I mean, it's just
I
sick.
literally was about to bring that up and read it to you because I wanted you to comment on that, and I still will because I do want you to comment on last generation theology. Before I do that, I'll just quickly bring up a couple of quick things. Zachariah said, "Very happy to be liberated from the SDA Church and the simplicity, I guess, and falling into the simplicity and understanding of the gospel." Have Zachariah, have you left the Adventist Church? And by the way, there are many people watching today that haven't left the church, and find a nice, I think Americans say niche. I say niche within the Adventist Church. Good on you. There's no judgment from me. Stay, go, enjoy whatever floats your boat. Test the Prophet has said, the hour will come, it is not far distant, and some of us who now believe will be alive upon the earth and shall see their prediction verified. View and Herald, July
Yes.
31, 88. I think that might be referring to the Food for Worms one. And just Larry has written, what would be the best outcome of your entire opus with regard to the SDA Church? It's a good question.
I'm a person who just believes in honesty, and the best outcome, as far as I'm concerned, would be what happened with the Church of God, for leaders to just be truthful and honest and let the chips fall where they may. I don't believe that would ever happen. I think the system would immediately reject any leader who would attempt to do that. Adventism is much more about protecting a system than it is about pursuing truth. And that system is about money and power and control.
Mm.
And, I did my best to try to change it over 35 years and
Mm.
experience what that's about. But, it's there's a lot of good people in the movement. I felt like my book Adventism for a New Generation moved a
Mm.
lot of people to a much more Christ-centered,
Mm.
spirit-led walk with God. I'm very thankful and grateful for that. And you know, I'd love to be wrong about that. I'd love to see the church actually confess the dishonesty
Mm.
and let the chips fall where they may. But there's no question with the deceitfulness and dishonesty that has produced the movement and sustained the movement, that it would be a ridiculous collapse.
Mm.
Ridiculous. And even the Church of God took a ridiculous financial hit.
Oh,
And
yes. It's
yeah,
never really recovered.
yeah. I mean, it's obviously denominations are about protecting themselves, benefiting themselves,
Mm.
sustaining themselves, and Adventism is really a classic one in that regard, that they would kiss up to Hitler and be the favored son, the only church that didn't get
Mm.
persecuted in Nazi Germany. And Adventism has shown its true colors under totalitarian governments throughout history, very much in a very sad way, which is tragic.
Mm. Zechariah replied, yes, he did leave the church a week ago. Wow. and Answering Adventism Miles podcast was a great resource and tool for that. You've been on Miles' show as well, haven't you?
Yes, yes.
I'm so grateful for the simplicity of the gospel I'm learning. I remember leaving Adventism, and it's 7 years ago last month, where I physically left. I think my mind had left a little earlier than that. But reading the Gospels again without that filter was like, well,
Yes.
it was such a fresh. I thought, this isn't rocket science.
That's great.
We, so thanks, Zachariah and Dave Edgren, and people like Dave Edgren and Jim Zeideveld and Jim Fitzsimmons are Adventist members. They love being in the church. They shine their gospel light within the church. Good on them. Stay and be a light. That's great.
Amen.
Dave has written one of the profitable things about Adventists, learned from Ellen G. White. Don't set dates.
Amen.
And we've got, let's give a plug to Chris Lucas, the Protestant View Live. He'll be doing a show with former third generation SDA Schola Scriptura this Friday on his channel. If any SDA wants to join in, we'll be talking about Daniel and why the SDA interpretation cannot be correct. Well, so I think Friday your time would be Saturday my time. Shoot me a message and I'll give that a little plug for you even more, Chris. We've got, historically speaking, does Ellen White ever come up with a solution for the people who pass through the investigative judgment? This is leading into my next question. So I'll just read something first, Steve, and then get your thoughts on this. But still alive on earth. Thank you again, Peter and Steve. And then we'll answer a few more questions, talk about your book and say farewell. But I wanted to run this past you because this answers that question. And it's something that's quite current within Adventism at the moment. So when we were just talking there, it was in 1856, Ellen White declared, I was shown that the company present at the conference, said the angel, some food for worms, some subjects of the 7 last plagues, some will be alive and remain upon the earth to be translated at the coming of Jesus. All who were alive then are now dead.
Right.
This prediction was not fulfilled. I'd written this at some point on a Facebook group. So do we then conclude that Mrs. White is not a true prophet? That's the question. So here, this is what I want you to think, what her answer to that. And currently people talk about last generation theology, and a lot of liberal progressive Adventists are saying, how can this have emerged from Adventism? How can we get it so wrong? Well, I think Ellen White is the source of last generation theology. And I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because her answer was, had Adventists after the great disappointment in 1844 held fast their faith and followed on unitedly in the opening providence of God, receiving the message of the third angel and in the power of the Holy Spirit, proclaiming it to the world, they would have seen the salvation of God. The Lord would have wrought mightily with their efforts. The work would have been completed and Christ would have come ere this to receive his people to their reward. And I then have gone on to quote heaps of things that she said in a similar vein. What are your thoughts on my theory that she is the source of last generation theology?
She's the source of everything in Adventism, every single thing. You know, the church tries to claim they're based on the Bible, but I can show that every single thing that Adventists believe is traced to visions of Ellen White.
And why do you think the liberal progressives, the more those that are perhaps more academically minded or scholars, why are they surprised that last generation theology is taking such a foothold in the Adventist church, when to me it seems clearly that, like you say, she is the source of all of these things? Why are
Yeah,
they
I
surprised?
don't know why they'd be surprised by that at all if they know Adventist history. I mean,
Mm,
it's just so obvious that she is the source of last generation theology and Adventism. And, it just completely is traced to her. Eschatology, more than anything, is traced to her, but it's all traced directly to her claimed visions. There is no doctrine in Adventism that can't be shown to be, you know, they, what the Adventists say is, oh, we found this from the Bible first, and then Ellen White confirmed it in vision. It's a complete lie. Everything they embrace because of a vision. The Sabbath they weren't sure about. Then she gets a vision that the fourth commandment's higher than the others, and as a halo, oh yeah, okay, God showed us. So the tithing they were rejecting. Then she gets a vision. You better accept it or you're going to hell. Oh yeah, okay. So this is always the case that the vision is what locks it into Adventist thinking, and the visions are always based on plagiarized materials, either from Adventist or non-Adventist, and it's not rocket science once you see the patterns and how she functioned over her lifetime. Um, why do so many Adventist historians, they might want to keep their jobs, there's a lot of reasons why Adventist historians haven't been honest with people. And a lot of it is that they don't know it themselves.
mm,
They might claim to know it after it's been written and revealed. But there was a lot of stuff I didn't know that was in the psychobiography, and I was a trained Adventist historian until I specifically researched that subject. It's like when you do a PhD dissertation, you dig in at a level that you've never dug into anything else. And when you write a book, you dig in at a level you'd never dug in. I didn't know anything about Canright before compared to when I wrote this last book.
mm.
So, these Adventist historians that try to say, "Oh, I knew all that stuff," like Butler did in his review of my psychobiography, that's bull crap. Butler was one of my teachers, and he didn't know all this stuff. And if he did, then shame on him for not sharing any of it with the church. It's just
Has he
kind of
released his book yet? He
what's
was, he
no,
was.
I don't know if he's ever going to release it. He's been working on that thing since I've known him, which is almost 43 years now.
Mm,
So
mm.
it's a
Jim,
long time to be writing a book.
Jim Zeidevelt has written, I think, in reply to it being worthwhile to stay. It's too big a movement for so many humble people around the world who never think at this level. They enjoy believing and do great things in their communities.
Yeah, I mean, the same with Mormons. There's all kinds of wonderful people and movements and small groups and great things that are done. And the systems can be evil, and that doesn't mean that the people in them are evil, and that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of good stuff and that God overcomes evil with good. And I know a lot of Adventists that are great, wonderful people, friends, family.
Mm,
The last thing I want to do is try to give the impression that anyone's an Adventist is messed up or something.
mm.
But
And I just want to add to that. I've got no problem. I'm not trying to say leave. We're just kind of talking and asking questions.
yeah,
Now we're kind of straying a little bit from the topic, but I know that whenever Steve Daly's on the show, people like, let's get a question in quickly that to get your thoughts on things. And I'm the same. So apologize that we're slightly going off track, but I really value your time in this conversation. Um, Cynthia has written, had my membership removed January 2007. Dave Edgren has written, there's a long tradition of date setting, Matthew 10:23. When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. And then he lists some other things there that confirm this. What are your thoughts on that? Even in Jesus' time, there were talks of the imminent return.
Yeah, certainly those texts have been interpreted in different ways, and what does he mean by the Son of Man comes? And that's, certainly understood as not necessarily meaning the second coming. And, this is a typical Adventist thing of whenever Ellen White's shown to be wrong, deceiving, lying, or they try to show some biblical parallel or something that plagiarism or whatever it happens to be. And to me, it's just a complete inappropriate comparison. When you look at the lifetime patterns of Ellen White and what are provable wrongs, and then try to compare that to the Bible, there's just absolutely no comparison. And you know, to try to imply that the Bible writers plagiarized the way Ellen White plagiarized is a complete joke. Um,
Mm.
uh, it was understood when they were quoting from the Old Testament and quoting from other writers. Um, that was a day and age when people had literature memorized, and it was there. There was no attempt there to hide what they were doing. Ellen made a very specific attempt to hide, even from her own secretaries, what she was doing, and to deny it, and to deny she'd read books that she'd clearly copied from. And then she'd claim she read it afterwards. And, oh, this is a lot like what I got in my vision. And I mean, she's just caught in this kind of stuff so much, and it's just lifetime patterns for her that she's just a dishonest person. I mean, I hate to say it, I grew up with her as my spiritual mother, but there's no getting around it unless you just don't give a rip about evidence and, source documentation. But at some point, you have to face the reality when you've studied the stuff that I've studied.
Do you think that what Jim Zeideveld wrote there, where people aren't thinking at it at this level and enjoying being in community and just loving the Sabbath and living a good life, are they in some way negatively impacted by all of this without realizing, or should they just be left alone to not even think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't have any burden to go around disturbing people who are having a good life and living in a healthy way. I will say that the last 13 plus, almost 14 years now out of Adventism has been a much freer, open, healthy existence for me compared to the 35 years in Adventism,
Mm,
where I had to struggle with all the politics and crap that was always
mm,
going around. And the dishonesty was always there. I saw these patterns of dishonesty
mm,
in leadership my whole lifetime, and it was very troubling to me. I understand them a lot better now that I see what the source of all this stuff is in Adventism.
mm,
But Adventism's never taught the true gospel. There were some comments about the simplicity of the gospel coming into that. I discovered the true gospel way back in the 70s, and that was a very important thing for me. I was so glad that I found that then, because Adventism has a false gospel. They don't want to admit it, but even the righteousness by faith of Venden and the ones that really helped the church a lot move in a better direction was still a mixture.
mm,
This mixture of law and grace, which God spits out of his mouth.
mm,
It's this mixture of hot and cold that makes for lukewarm, and it's you can't put the new wine in the old wineskins. And
mm,
Adam tries to do that. They try to hold on to the old covenant and all this old covenant stuff while they're claiming grace. And it really is confusing and it's condemning, because when you're under law, you're under condemnation. And a
mm,
lot of people don't understand this. I'm
mm,
not saying a person under law can't be saved. Romans 2 makes it clear that God has a big toolbox and he saves a lot of people that even never even heard of the Bible or Jesus.
mm,
But um, but that doesn't mean that you want to be under an unhealthy system. that you want to be under false teaching. I think people should want to know the freedom of grace and the gospel to the greatest degree they can, and it will bring them the greatest degree of joy and peace and happiness and fulfillment in life.
Mm. I've certainly felt a kind of liberation that I wasn't expecting,
Amen.
um, which is a very nice experience to
Amen.
have in my later life.
It
This I often pronounce this wrong. Timur Kukuja. Write to me and send me an audio of how to pronounce your name correctly, because you do write some good questions and comments, and I want to honour respectfully saying your name correctly. We'll just take this as a statement or a comment. The Worldwide Church of God Today, Grace Communion International, was the only church organisation that faced its cultic past honestly and embraced the simplicity of the gospel despite the cost they had to pay. And I think the Adventist Church had a great opportunity 43 years ago with Glacier View to really address this, and but they let the ball drop on that one.
They
Or
had the greatest opportunity in 1919, where the leadership
yes,
itself was saying, "Hey, we need to face the truth."
mm,
They got put out of office, and the minutes or the transcripts got buried for more
yeah,
than 50 years.
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
That was tragic. That was really tragic for the movement.
Dave Edgren has, yeah, you're 100% right. And they tried to rectify it again in 57 with questions on doctrine. Again, there in Glacier View. And I fear that there's never going to be another time like that. I don't think there'll ever be another time like 1919, 1957, or 1980.
Yeah.
Dave has written, what advice do you have for Ellen G. White doubting Adventists to come out of her, my people, without losing their loving church family and faith? Do we have to leave the church? Can the laity reform the church rather than waiting for those in power who must protect the entity to change?
Yeah, I mean, I sure wish I believed that the laity could reform the church. I think it's such a hierarchical structure that there's not the real ability in place for it's not like you can call a constitutional convention in Adventism. But, I think what can be done is you can get like-minded people who are Adventists, who are Christ-centered, spirit-filled, open to truth, study together. I think the future of the church will ultimately be small groups, underground churches. Uh, I think we're in a culture that will ultimately become quite hostile to Christianity. And, sooner or later that will happen. But it could happen sooner. And I'm a real strong believer in small groups and spiritual partnerships, and having close relationships with people who are committed to the same principles and values. And, the church, you can just give the highway sign to the church as far as what you're doing as a small group, and, supporting each other and even doing ministry together. And that's the important thing is community. And that's what the Bible's about. Church is community.
Mm,
And uh, where the church has been the healthiest in history, it has been an underground church and a persecuted church.
well, that's interesting.
So we're coming to that day again.
Just talking about small groups while you were talking there, I was just looking up the one they have at college here. Here, I think it's called E14. I just want to give them a plug because they have a great program every week, and I'm happy to pass on the information of how you can get links to that, because I think you're right. These small underground groups, um, they're gathering together and they're having a really great impact. But not only that, they have this great camaraderie, like-minded thoughts gathering. And
Yeah.
also there's some that meet Fritz Guy, Larry Garrity. Do they meet? Is that Loma Linda or Andrews? I can get
Uh,
confused.
Butler, Gill, they're all in a small group called Dead Prophet Society.
That's right. And there's another one though with Fritz Guy that they have a Sabbath school program every week. I can't remember if that's Loma Linda or if it's Andrews.
I think it's at La Sierra, the one guy
La
goes to.
Sierra.
Yeah.
Sorry, La Sierra. That's right. Yes. So people can look out those places if they want to connect and hang out with people that are like-minded in the way that I think Dave's talking about. So yeah, good question, Dave. Hopefully we've answered that, and if not, just shoot us another comment. We are going to wrap it up. So, Nancy's watching. Hi, Nancy. Good to have you on the watching the program. Look forward to chatting with you and Steve in a couple of months as well. Kent Campbell has written 19th century Millerite author Isaac Cummings Welcome called Ellen White a trance medium. Isn't that a sufficient explanation for her many failed visions?
Yeah, I think a lot of, like Ann Taves, my major professor at Claremont, would have called her a trance medium. I think that's a fairly common interpretation of what she was.
Braden Rice has written, every church has problems, misunderstandings, and some degree of dishonesty in administration, but Adventism has many fault lines of manipulation, and to ignore this is just self-deception.
Yeah, agreed.
I think this is Nancy has written, God bless you both. I wish I could listen, but we're driving. Love you both.
Nice.
Safe travels. And as I said earlier, can't wait to have you on the program. And if people want to listen to our interview, Nancy, it's number 69, season 2. And John Davidson has written, thanks, Steve and Peter. Great time and good discussion. This old man needs to find his bed. Looking forward to more. We will be closing this interview very soon. So thanks for watching and sweet dreams. Who has written this? I think this has come from one of our other platforms that we're going live to. By the way, welcome those watching from Discord. We've just gone live today there for the first time. So we're live on Discord, Twitch, Twitter, 2 Facebook groups, YouTube, and pretty soon season 2, the Des Ford season of 86 interviews is getting uploaded as well. So that's going to hit the general public very soon. So this person has written, I'm not invested in correcting the system. I meet with loving people at the local setting and get involved in Pathfinders, ADRA, etc. Good on you. I wish I knew who said that. I'd like to say hello and give you a plug. Dave has replied to our comments. Interesting. You still have a fear-based faith that expects the world to chase you into the hills. What is your experience with non-scarcity-based Jesus followers? I don't think Jesus was afraid of the world. He loved it so much. He gave his life for it. I think, is that a comment or a statement? Not sure if Dave wants us to comment on that. And I think, Adrian said the last comment was Jim Fitzsimmons, I think, might have been. And Ray has written, Adventists are not great, wonderful people. Adventists are accusers of the brethren, heretics and blasphemers. Not all of them, Ray.
But some of them are. Yeah.
I find the leadership greatly wanting in this regard. They're not really speaking up in any way. And if you're a union level or division level leader, everything you post is propaganda. We want some real stuff. Come on the show and tell us, share your convictions with us. Ray, if a miracle happens and an Adventist cultist is saved, they must leave the disgusting cult immediately. It was Jim Zeideveld that had written that previous post. That was this one here. Thanks, Jim Zeideveld. I'm not invested in correcting the system. I meet with loving people at the local setting and get involved with pastors and Andra. And Jim, I know you do, and you do a great job, and you're a much valued member of the broader community, the Adventist community, and our SDAQ&A community too. Okay, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for watching today. Steve, one quick last plug. Wrap it up with what we can expect from your new book, and we're very much looking forward to that. What can we expect? And remind
just a lot of things are happening. I'm excited about. I was very excited about the Hassan interview, and I think this new book is one that's it's different from the psychobiography in the sense that we're putting out and exposing something that's never been exposed before in a publication like this. So it'll be very interesting to see how the church reacts to it. I've included a couple appendixes dealing with, since Spectrum refused to publish my response to Butler, I've put my response to Butler as one appendix in there, and my response to the White Estate review of my psychobiography.
You had a response to Thompson, was it as well?
Yeah, that was just to a letter. That's online and stuff. But the two major reviews were Butler's and Tim with the White Estate. So since both the White Estate and the Spectrum refused to even put my response on their website, I'm putting that as appendixes in the book so people can read them for themselves and see how I responded to both of those. But it'll be, I think it'll be a book that generates a lot of interest, and we'll see how people respond to it. But it's been fun. I've enjoyed working with Nancy a lot, and thank you for inviting me on the program, Peter.
Oh, it's been great having you, Steve. I can't wait to have you back. And thanks everyone for watching. Quick self-promotion here. I've had several people clicking the QR codes and making donations today. I really appreciate that. I put a lot of hours into this show, and I enjoy it and love it. And but it has become kind of my main source of income, and I do enjoy putting it together. You can listen to my music for free there as well on Spotify. And again, thanks so much for watching, everybody. And we very much look forward to having Steve back. And we'll be back again next week with more. Can't remember off the top of my head who's coming up next, but it's going to be fascinating. See you, Steve.
All right. Thank you.